Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry, folks, just finishing up something here. Okay, so let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for a beautiful day. I pray that you'll bless our time together and help us to make some sense of the things that are going on in the world that are happening so quickly. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm going to call this speeding into the matrix. And the reason I called it that is because I couldn't think of anything else. But I do have some stuff on artificial intelligence. These are the things we talk about. Acceleration, a lot of these things we see in Bible prophecy, all these different passages, Ezekiel 38, Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, Zechariah, Daniel, Matthew 24, the book of Revelation, and so all these little elements that we have about what things are going to be like at the end, including 2 Timothy 3, 1 Timothy 4, about deception, what Jesus said about deception in Matthew 24. All these things are going to be happening very, very quickly. And I think it's fairly safe to say that we're seeing that. Things are going very quickly, and then they're all converging at once. And so the convergence point, I think, is the second coming of Jesus Christ. So I don't always read every scripture that's related. I want you to go home and study and be familiar with these passages so you can see, okay, oh, now I know where he's going with that. But, and I will refer to a few passages today. And then there's a logistics part, and I'll use the example of end-time Babylon. So there are all these different theories about Babylon. One is that Jerusalem is the final Babylon. Now, that's not, I don't think that's as widely known or as accepted as some of the other views. Another view is that Babylon is Babylon. And so the people that promote Babylon in Iraq are rebuilt. There's nothing there right now, virtually nothing. Those who promote an end-time Babylon in Iraq, I think that's where this logistics thing comes in, because if it's going to be this great commercial power city at the end, you would think that they have to build some stuff there. Now, there was some infrastructure that was built when the U.S. was more involved in Iraq than they are. They built, at the time, it may still be the largest U.S. embassy anywhere on the planet in Baghdad. But I just want to be clear. People say Babylon means Babylon. Well, Baghdad is not Babylon. Can we agree on that? That they're two separate places. They're about 50 miles apart. And there also seems to be a seaport associated with Babylon. But the Babylon of today, because the Persian Gulf is filled in the delta from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, it's 350 miles from the coastline. So to me, that's somewhat problematic. But then the argument is, well, Babylon is mentioned 300 times in Scripture, and it means Babylon. And while I agree with that, the problem is that in Revelation, it talks about, it does have the word Babylon, but it's preceded by the word mysterion, a mystery. Now, so the question is, what does that mean? Is it, the mystery could be that this city that was long gone and everybody thought was dead and gone away has come back, and it's a mystery how that happens. Or it could mean that it has a deeper meaning. So I look at all the different ones. So some people say it's Rome. Some people say it's New York City in the United States. Other people say it's Babylon. Some people say Jerusalem. Some people say, and I talk a little bit about Neom, and there's a current video out there. I don't have the clip today. I played it, though. The architects that are designing this city in Saudi Arabia, the one that's 100 miles long, and it does have, when you look at the architectural renderings of the interior of this, it does look very much like the drawings that people have made of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which was one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. So maybe it's Neom, and Neom's in an interesting location. And when they tout Neom, They say, look, it's by all these shipping lanes. It's within 8-hour flight of, I don't know, a large percentage of the world's population. So it's at a commercial center, a commercial crossroads. And the difference between Neom and the Babylon in Iraq is they're actually building something in Neom. And it's about, in terms of including the infrastructure and foundational work, it's about 25% completed. Which nobody, and it's going to cost $1 trillion. And their goal is to have a large portion of it done by 2030, which is always kind of an interesting date and all these things. So that's the logistics part. When you look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, it talks about this invasion coming against the land of Israel from the north in the end times with a great company and a mighty army. What does that mean? And I talked a little bit about this last week in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 9 says, you will come up as a cloud. And so now we have all of this drone technology that's developing, including drone swarms, which is changing the face of warfare. So, and then understanding, as we get closer to the end, we'll have a better understanding of how these things come about. And that's what I refer to every week. It's in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. It's in Daniel 11. And then in Daniel 8, Daniel says, and I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Now you get into another argument. When is the time of the end? Was it when Jesus ascended and ascended back to heaven after his crucifixion and resurrection and spending 40 days with his disciples? Or is it the end close to the Lord's second return? I lean towards that latter one. And it says in verse 10, many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And that's that word, sakal. So we talk about that. So here's the verse in Daniel chapter 11. And those of the people who understand shall instruct many, yet for many days they shall fall by sword and fly by captivity and plundering. So this is something that I think we want to be part of the wise. So we need to be in the Word and studying these things. And then there's also some other passages that I think are important. For example, here's Zechariah 12, and I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierce. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns only for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for his firstborn. And that, I think, is related to Hosea 5 and Hosea 6. In verse 15, it says, I will return again to my place till they acknowledge their offense. And we've talked about what is the offense. And I think when we were early in the book of Acts and Paul's message on Pentecost, there was reference, and Stephen also referenced it, that they said, his blood be on us and on our children. So the offense may have been the rejection of the Messiah when he was here. In their affliction, they will earnestly seek me. So it seems like they're going to be under this period of stress when they look for Jesus and they ask him to return, to rescue them. Come, Hosea chapter 6, verse 1, come and let us return to the Lord, for he has torn, but he will heal us up. He has stricken, but he will bind us. After 2 days, he will revive us. On the third day, he will raise us up that we may live in his sight. And it may be that this is a time marker for around when this is going to take place. Now, we don't know exactly when Jesus ascended back to heaven. Was it 28? Was it 30? Was it 32? Was it 33 AD? But if it's 2 days, 2,000 years from that, then we might be entering a significant time. Then again, maybe we're not, because there are a lot of things that need to come together. But one thing that we can say with some certainty is as the title today indicates, speeding into the matrix, things are happening pretty quickly, very quickly. And so then we also have this passage in Zechariah that Jerusalem will be a cup of trembling. And I think we can see that now because what do you see everybody talking about with regard to the Middle East? What's going to happen in Jerusalem? What's going to happen on the Temple Mount? Are they going to sacrifice the red heifers anytime soon? By the way, I don't know on that. They might not. But if they do, that's pretty important, because it does involve this purification of the Temple Mount for sacrifice that I think is here in the end times. And then it says, I will gather all nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. So we have this city that's had this incredible development. This is an aerial shot of Jerusalem back, I think, in the late 40s or 50s, and what it is today. And it's interesting, if you look at some of these pictures, for example, this picture, older picture, if you look down here in the lower right-hand corner, that's the city area of the city of David. And until recently, until after 2000, really, that had not really changed, but now it's all built up. It's a city. There's excavations. They've uncovered a large portion of the pilgrimage road, and this is going to be this is the epicenter of where a lot of the conflict is going to be. The Muslims claim this area, Haram al-Sharif. That was the whole compound area. It included the Dome of the Rock, which is not a mosque. It's a commemorative building. It's built over the site of a church, and many in the Jewish community believe that's where the temple stood. And then at the southern end of the Temple Mount there on the right, that gray dome is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Well, now, what are they doing? The narrative has changed, and they're calling the whole thing, the whole compound, Al-Aqsa. That's never what it's been called. That's made up. So the operation that Hamas conducted against Israel on October 7th was called Al-Aqsa Flood. So around Ramadan every year, they really get everybody stirred up. It's interesting, though, this year, and I was on, I don't know, I did a few interviews this week. I did some discussions with people, and I get to the point where I can't remember if I talked about it here. I can't remember if I talked about it in one of those videos. So just go watch them all. No, many times. No, I'm just kidding. But I was talking about this narrative that's come up, and there's a guy out there, you can find a video of his. I've linked to it before. He was a professor on professor track at the University of Pennsylvania. His name is Francisco Gil White. Look him up. He has a phenomenal video on this conflict between the Muslims and Israel. And it's as good historically as anything that I've ever seen in the relationship. So I won't go into it. You can find that Francisco Gil White on YouTube, and I would highly recommend that. Now, I did do a bunch of videos this week. As I said, I had some interviews with people. Tom Hughes, I always do something on Tuesdays with him. This week it was on Wednesday, though. And, of course, when we started, and this seems to happen, boom, his internet in California goes down completely for like 30 minutes. So we're scrambling, trying to figure out what happened. Nobody knows. And it just seems that's one of the risks of doing something live is it's very stressful. And particularly when I'm at home, my crack staff that we have on Sundays is not there at home to help me out. So you're trying to get everything started, make sure it's running. So to be honest with you, I did a video this week. Listen, if you're tired of me talking and rambling, then go watch the interview I did with Avraham Levine of Alma Research. It's on our YouTube channel. This is one of the most incredible interview subjects I've ever had in my life. And that's not a denigration against anybody else I've ever interviewed. But Avraham is a father of 8, 45. He served in the IDF in the first two Lebanon wars in 2000 and 2006. He lives in the Golan, about a mile or so from the Syrian border. So he lives right in the middle of a lot of this conflict, and he has served in Gaza. I won't go too much into the substance of the interview, but he explains in that interview how difficult the fighting is in Gaza. The fact that Israel has gone in there and only lost a couple hundred, maybe 200 to 250 soldiers since the fighting started is unbelievable. And there's a lot of false narratives, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So I've got some potential interviews coming up this week with, well, there's a lady that I cite a lot. It looks like I'm going to get to interview her finally. I don't want to jinx it, but someone for whom I have a lot of respect. And so we see these things, and we're going to see these things unfold over time. So this is an example that I use of the seal judgments, the opening of the seals, and whatever is related in the seals will start, but it will continue on through this last period of history. It will get more and more intense over time. I think that that's a pretty good way to understand what's going on. And then, of course, we have the trumpet and the bowl judgments, and we'll talk about them. Now, there's a thing coming up here on April the 8th, and it's touch and go right now. It's Ohio. Are we even going to be able to see this thing? It's the total eclipse. And there are tons of videos out there. My view is, I think that we can go too far with it. I don't necessarily see it in Scripture. And so people that I talk to all the time, they think it's very significant and all this other stuff. So listen, maybe on April 9th we can talk about it. People say, well, it's a sign that America needs to repent. My response to that is, if you don't think America needs to repent as a culture, then you're not really paying attention, because there's plenty of evidence to say, okay, we don't need an eclipse to tell America to do that. And there's a lot of things going. Now, my other view is that the fact that an eclipse happens is a miracle by God's design of creation. So we think of the universe in this kind of two-dimensional, the planets going around the sun, and then we have the moon going around the earth. But the moon has to be the exact right size and the exact right distance relative to the size and distance of the sun from the earth, so that on a special eclipse like we're having this time, it blocks out everything except the corona. That's amazing. So I found this graphic, I hope it shows up, that someone did about the universe and why the fact that there is an eclipse is a miracle. So look at this. So here the solar system, and this is what we think it looks like, but he says, no. It really is the sun traveling through space with all the planets around it and the moon going around all the different planets. And so that line, you see how complicated that is? And that lines up, and you can predict, even ancient cultures could predict. They've found some ancient sort of calculators, solar calculators, and they found that even 2,000 years ago, there was at least one culture that could predict the April 8th eclipse to the day and place on the planet. Because they've gone back and they've used the tool that they found, and they were able to say, yeah, there is going to be an eclipse across the United States. And there's going to be an eclipse across mostly all the United States. It's just that the path of totality, I think it's about 140 miles wide. So here, I don't know if the church is in totality, but I know over where we live on the other side of Interstate 71, we will be in the path of totality. So get your little glasses, don't look at the thing. And there's all kinds of like people saying, the FEMA people get involved. Oh, there's going to be get water, get gas, and the thing lasts for like 4 minutes max. And they're closing schools. Because why are they closing schools? Are they expecting something? I don't know. Listen, I always try to figure out the simplest explanation. So why are they closing a school? Well, one, it's unique. And here, it's going to be going through here around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, what's 3 o'clock? That's when all the elementary schools let out, right? And so do you want all those little kids, oh, look at that up there and going blind because you want them home with their parents. And maybe the best explanation is the eclipse is on April 8th. That's a Monday. And if they close school on Monday, they get a 3-day weekend. Right? So that's a simple explanation. So we'll see. So I want to talk a little bit. So I'm going to talk about cultural things. I'm going to talk some about AI. There are tremendous developments there. So the cultural thing is this transgender mafia is just going crazy. So here's Wales. Wales let pupils change gender in schools. So what does that mean? It means the kids without the parents' knowledge are allowed to pretend they're a different gender at schools in Wales. And people are upset about this. They don't want that to happen. And I'm telling you, go look for the videos of people who have transitioned and what they say they have to do. It's not seamless transition from one sex to the other. And they talk about bleeding and they talk about the PVC piping that have had to been put in them. Yes, that's true. Read the descriptions of the surgery. Then look at the fact that they don't understand the long-term effects of these hormone blocking or hormone changing drugs that they give people. And the insanity of it is the elite medical institutions seem to be fully on board with it. It makes no sense to me. And when you understand and go look back, the first transgender clinic was started, I believe, at Johns Hopkins University. That's where they did the first surgery. And I don't know how else to say it, but the person who started it was a pervert. It's the simple thing. So this is, and here's an editorial from the Wall Street Journal yesterday or Friday. Gender ideology invades the foster care system. So in Washington and Oregon, now when I say Washington and Oregon, I will make a disclaimer. I'm not talking about everybody that lives in those states. There's a lot of really good people in those states. I have friends that live in those states, but the people running the thing are loony. They're nuts. They don't have your best interests at heart. They're a bunch of radical left-wing ideologues that do really silly, moronic, stupid things. So, but that doesn't mean everybody in those states is that way. Okay, just just everybody acknowledge, just not making fun of everybody that lives in Oregon, or when I talk about Canada or Wales or Scotland, I'm not running everybody down. I'm making a generalization about the knuckleheads in charge. That's a very technical term, knucklehead. So in the foster care system now, unless you are fully on board with this, you cannot take care of children in the foster care system in those states. So what does that do? It excludes Christian people from the system. Do you think that that's by design, maybe? That that's what they want? And so we're entering this period of time. So here's a little bit of a clip of a debate in the Scottish Parliament, because Scotland on April 1st will put in place a hate crime law. And people are very concerned about how that goes. So here's just a little bit of that debate. You'll hear a conservative person, and then you're going to hear, I think they call him the First Minister, a guy named Youssef. He's Muslim. I saw a video of him this week saying, all we have is a bunch of white people in charge around here. Well, Mr. Youssef, it's Scotland, And you want to exclude those people because of your radical left-wing ideology. So you'll hear him talk at the end to defend what's going on. So here's a little bit of the debate in the Scottish Parliament.
Let's remember Hamza Yusuf introduced this unworkable and dangerous law when he was Justice Secretary. Now he's bringing it into force as First Minister with little training and not enough support for the officers who will have to enforce it. Let's have a quote from a professor of law at Glasgow University, First Minister it just quoted. Alistair Bonington said this: "Like many of the SNP's attempts at lawmaking, this act will be set aside when it is properly examined in a serious court. This looks like another SNP law that will have to be discarded, just like the named persons and the offensive behaviour at Football Act. We've said from the outset this law is a disaster in the making. It criminalises free speech. It risks a fundamental right. It's overreach by the SNP into people's homes. It could result in the public being criminalised for no good reason. It is set to be a shambles.
Let's hear Mr. Ross.
It is set to be a shambles from day one in just 11 days' time. So will Hamza Yusuf finally accept that he has created another bad SNP law that will quickly descend into chaos?"
First Minister.
What's dangerous, presiding officer, isn't the law. What's dangerous is hate crime in our society, presiding officer. You see, presiding officer, we did debate this act when it was, of course, a bill going through this Parliament extensively. Many years ago, robust debate. Actually, I thought debate is sometimes and often the best traditions of this Parliament. There was compromises. There was amendments that were accepted by the government. We came out of that process with a good piece of legislation that fundamentally protected people's freedom of expression, freedom of speech, but also safeguarded people's right not to have hatred stirred up against them.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That cut off, and that's good. I mean, listen, he sent a bunch of money to Gaza, to Hamas, to fund what's going on there. So that sort of shows his orientation. And let him go push this gender ideology in Gaza. I want to see that. I'll buy the popcorn for that one. And I don't know if it's a fear that and you see all these people, like these crazy groups like Queers for Palestine. What do you think would happen to those people in Palestine? And I guess they think, well, if we support them, they'll get us. But believe me, they're coming for you first. That's the deal, if they ever get in charge. So Ayaan Hirsi Ali, very interesting lady. I think she is an atheist. She's married to Niall Ferguson. You see him on some of the Hoover Institution podcasts, Common Knowledge, that type of thing. She came from Somalia. She had been forced into a marriage, some surgeries, forced on her. She escaped Somalia, and unlike a certain congressperson in Minneapolis, she actually she didn't lose her mind. She didn't become part of this leftist ideology. She went to the Netherlands. She had to leave the Netherlands, though, because one of her colleagues was murdered. And so she has lived, I believe, with personal protection because she has spoken out against Islam. And she understands how this crazy ideology really destroys society. So she has an article over at a blog called Unheard, HERD. The West has a deviancy problem. Just listen to the opening paragraph or two of this. When and why did American life become so coarse, amoral, and ungovernable? In his classic 1993 essay, Defining Deviancy Down, the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan offered a semantic explanation. He concluded that as the amount of deviant behavior increased beyond the levels the community can afford to recognize, we have been redefining deviancy so as to exempt conduct we used to stigmatize, while also quietly raising the normal level in categories where behavior is now abnormal by any earlier standard. Okay? Traditional morals, now you're abnormal. Immoral people are now normal. Everything is turned upside down. And listen, when you look at 2 Timothy chapter 3 and Romans 1, and it talks about that that this, and because I don't think she's a Christian, I pray that she will become one if she's not. It still means, but she's very smart. But Romans tells us that God, in judgment, God will give them over to a reprobate mind. First Corinthians implies that they lose the ability to reason. One commentator says that the word that's used is the root word that from which we get the word moron. So in effect, God morons the world because people cannot reason when they're caught up in this. And as they progress down this immoral pathway, it gets worse and worse and worse. And I think we're living in that Romans 1 world. The reasons behind this, Point Moynihan said, were altruism, opportunism, and denial. But the result was the same, an acceptance of mental pathology, broken families, and crime as a fact of life. And that same summer, Charles Krauthammer, another atheist, by the way, responded to Senator Moynihan with a speech at the American Enterprise Institute. He acknowledged Senator Moynihan's point, but said it was only for one side of the story. Deviancy was defined down for one category of society, the lower classes and black communities. For the middle classes, who were overwhelmingly white and Christian, Krauthammer said, the opposite was true. Deviancy was in fact defined up, stigmatizing and criminalizing behavior that was previously regarded as normal. In other words, there was a double standard at work. So when this conservative member of the Scottish National Parliament, the SNP, gets up and says, this law is just making a criminal out of everybody, what was the left-wing Youssef guy's response? You're the one who's really the problem in all of this. It's your fault. You're the problem. And we're very divided. So that is the state of the world. Now, there are some other things that I think that are concerning, and this I'm sort of going into AI there. This is from the Times of London, an article, My Hong Kong Has Changed Forever, How Long Can I Stay? And this person relates their experience, his or her experience, and she says, the political crackdown in Hong Kong has changed my home forever, and not only in the obvious terrible ways. In the 5 years since the democracy demonstrations against the pro-Chinese government, I have lost 2 friends to suicide and seen many arrested, charged, imprisoned, and have just disappeared. So this is a normal person in Hong Kong. So there's this oppressive government called the Chinese Communist Party that runs China. And they say, well, we have a form of capitalism. We're okay. We believe in some kind of economic freedom, but they're all about control. And so when I see podcasts with these crazy lunatics like Professor Jeffrey Sachs, I was just watching it today, S-A-C-H-S. To me, he comes off as a completely, there's nothing wrong with China. I've been there. They treat me very well. Now, that may be one of 2 reasons. One, he's getting paid by them. That's one. Or 2, he's so stupid he doesn't see it, and he's a tool for them. In any event, he's a tool for the Chinese Communist Party. And America is the worst thing in the world. And why would we worry about China taking over Taiwan? It's just insane. And the guy's, I think, just a complete lunatic. So here's an article on the front page of the Financial Times the other day, Cold War-style safeguards needed to avert AI Armageddon, scientists warn. And I think this was the other day. I don't have the top part of that. So listen, as I was researching AI, this article came up, and I think it was this week. But it's true. I mean, we've had people warning about this for the last year and a half in the AI space, that we need to control this. At the World Economic Forum, her Her last name is spelled Assis. She works for IBM. And she was on a panel at the most recent Davos meeting, and she said, I know the question will be asked is, are we approaching a cyber Armageddon? Yes, we are. And she just kind of went on then like, yeah, everybody knows that that's coming. And I think it is. People try to regulate it, but as I've been studying this, it's gone too far. Now, I've been talking to people that work, that know about it, and I'm being told it's way beyond what you think. So I'm going to make a recommendation to you on how to maybe look at this. So companies that are involved in artificial intelligence, what they have to do is they have to buy processing time, with these GPU computer processing units to be able to process the data. So I think what you need to watch as best as you can, if you want to know who's really the potential problem, is you need to watch who's buying processing time. And I'm not going to share names or anything today, but I believe that there have been some large purchases of processing time. And how do I say this the right way? It ain't by computer companies or data companies. It's by people that do not have your best interest at heart, in my judgment. So watch this space. Now, in about 2 weeks, we did Tom Hughes, Britt Gillette, Scott Townsend, and myself did about a 2-hour talk, 2-hour, 15-minute talk on AI and technology and how that relates to the mark of the beast. And we have this whole passage in Revelation chapter 13 that talks about mark of the beast technology. How's this going to come about? So in about 2 weeks, it's April 8th, 9th, or 10th, probably April 9th or 10th, we're going to do another roundtable where we're going to talk about this, and we're going to be joined this time by Patrick Wood. And Patrick's very insightful. I talked to Patrick on the phone the other day about some of these issues. Longtime friend, he's been here, did a conference here a number of years ago. And Patrick's view is that when this mark of the beast technology comes about, it appears that it comes about after the abomination of desolation. I talked a lot about that last week, so go look at the beginning part of my prophecy update. Abomination of desolation takes place, and then they're going to roll out this technology to control how people buy and sell. Now, we don't know exactly what this technology is, and those of us who've been talking about Bible prophecy for a long time, it was a chip in the hand, it was barcodes, it was all these things. And now we're at a place, we're very far down the road and it's changing. So our righteous speculation has evolved over time, and that's okay because the world changed. Do you agree that in the last 30 years, the world has changed a bit? Especially on the technology side, because 30 years ago, I was getting my first cell phone. And it was about maybe 20 years ago that the iPhone came out. And that's changed society and culture a lot. So now, I get pictures of my great nieces and nephews sleeping in the shopping cart at a Costco in West Virginia. Oh, look how cute that is. Because they have a phone and a camera and they have a movie studio in their pocket. We all do. And things have changed dramatically. And it's not being rolled back anytime soon. So we've got this technology coming and there's problems with it, but as Patrick has said many times, when the false prophet and the Antichrist, the abomination of desolation takes place, they're not going to sit down and say, Mr. False Prophet, it would be really nice if we had some kind of technological way to control how people buy and sell so they will worship me. So maybe we can set up a crowdsource or crowdfunding thing and raise some capital and develop one of these systems. That's not the way it's going to happen. The system is going to be there and they're going to say, let's go flip the switch. And Naomi Wolf said that, and she's liberal, classic liberal. She said that a couple of years ago. She goes, they're just going to flip a switch to control people. And I remember that was the first video we ever had taken down by our masters at YouTube. So here is one of the things they talk about is the misinformation Armageddon, how artificial intelligence could undermine democracies. I'll make reference to Patrick's article that he wrote this week, The Gaping Holes in AI Theory and Practice, and how that, and he talks about technocracy in that. He has a Substack. You can, I think it's called the Quickening Report, and you can go get that. But this is a couple clips of NVIDIA rollout of technology this week. Look at the wording that they use. I am a visionary.
Illuminating galaxies to witness the birth of stars.
This was a big conference, about 15,000 people this week that NVIDIA held.
And sharpening our understanding of extreme weather events. I am a helper, guiding the blind through a crowded world.
I was thinking about running to the store.
And giving voice to those who cannot speak.
Do not make me laugh.
I am a transformer, harnessing gravity to store renewable power. And paving the way towards unlimited clean energy for us all. I am a trainer, teaching robots to assist, to watch out for danger, and help save lives. I am a healer, providing a new generation of cures and new levels of patient care.
Doctor, that I am allergic to penicillin. Is it still okay to take the medications?
Definitely. These antibiotics don't contain penicillin, so it's perfectly safe for you to take them.
I am a navigator, generating virtual scenarios to let us safely explore the real world and understand every decision. I even helped write the script. Breathe life into the words en muchos idiomas y escribí la música. I am AI, brought to life by NVIDIA, deep learning, and brilliant minds everywhere.
So the thing is it's hard to say. Do you understand where we are? And do you see the almost religious language and terminologies that used? I am a transformer. I am a healer. And I've talked about this, so I'm going to summarize it very quickly. Mark Andreessen, who is a multi-billionaire. I think he contributes to conservative causes. I don't know. But he's into technology. In fact, I think I just saw he listed as one of his homes in Silicon Valley for about $30 million the other day, in case you're interested in picking up a fixer-upper. But here's Elon Musk the other day tweeting this. Blind sight is the next Neuralink product after telepathy. I should mention that the blind sight implant is already working in monkeys. Resolution will be low at first, like early Nintendo graphics, but ultimately may exceed normal human vision. Now, this is the guy who a week ago said that AI, when Ray Kurzweil said that AI by 2029 would be smarter than the smartest human, Elon Musk came out and said, no, it's going to be smarter than all humanity. It's going to be smarter than the smartest human by next year. And by 2029, it will be smarter than the combined intelligence of all humanity. And so they're processing, and they've got to get these plants. And so this week, I don't know if you saw in the local paper, a certain billionaire who still owns a lot of, but is no longer involved in the company, they say, Microsoft, the company that gave us that, remember that stupid little thing called Clippy? Remember that little paper clip that used to run around your programs? You had to go turn it. By the way, you know that thing's coming back? I guess the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. But he's bought, I think I have the numbers right, about 50,000 acres of farmland out in Madison County, and he's going to build a solar array. And something that he's doing is going to cost $1 billion. He's going to put solar on 4,400 acres of productive farmland. And I don't know what for, because I don't know that there's that much out in Madison County that needs that kind of power. He's also investing in small nuclear power plants because Microsoft is investigating how to do that, so they have the ability to operate all these processing centers that they're putting in. And by the way, the biggest company in AI is Microsoft, by far. The engine is provided by Neuralink. So here's Elon Musk saying, we're going to do this, help people see. And here's what Mark Andreessen said in his thing. This guy who put this tweet up, Elon spat on the ground, made a Neuralink with the spittle, put this over the eyes of the blind man, and said to the man born blind, go and wash in the pool of Austin. And the man had his sight restored, John chapter 9. And this is what a Mark Andreessen said, you know who else made the blind men see? Now, that's interesting. I've said this, I've repeated this story a number of times. I was at the Christian Media Summit in Israel in December 2022. Jonathan Medved got up and he goes, this AI stuff, you got to get this ChatGPT, it's unbelievable. And this AI is going to help us in medicine. We will make the lame walk. That's exactly what he said. And that came on the heels of the Neuralink rollout that they'd had just a week or two before I went to Israel, where they went and we will make the lame walk. We will make the blind see. We will make the deaf hear. Now, as I said, I have artificial joints. I'm not opposed to medical technology enhancement. It's changed my life. But there is a limit, and when people are speaking about it in terms of we are going to repeat the messianic signs, the messianic things that Jesus was able to do, that makes me wonder how long will the Lord allow this, how far will the Lord allow this to go before he intervenes, just like he intervened at the time of the Tower of Babel. Because the Neuralink methodology, as I said, went in the order, and when Jesus, the disciples of John the Baptist were sent to Jesus, John said, you guys go ask him if he's the one, or should we look for another? And so they came to Jesus and said this. You can read about it in the Gospels. And Jesus said, listen, you go tell John what you have seen. The lame walk, the blind see, the deaf hear. And so now we have these people with these incredible powers and money and technology that are mimicking the messianic signs of Jesus. And that's indicative of where we live, I think. Okay. So here's, let me play this one. This is in the I'm going to just jump into the middle of his talk. Here's Jason Wang, the CEO, founder and CEO of NVIDIA. Here's a little bit more of his talk.
A quadrillion is like a peta. And so if you had a petaflop GPU, you would need 30 billion seconds to go compute, to go train that model. 30 billion seconds is approximately 1,000 years. Well, 1,000 years, it's worth it. I'd like to do it sooner, but it's worth it. It's usually my answer when most people tell me, hey, how long is it going to take to do something? So 20 years? It's worth it. But can we do it next week? And so 1,000 years, 1,000 years. So what we need are bigger GPUs. We need much, much bigger GPUs. We recognized this early on, and we realized that the answer is to put a whole bunch of GPUs together. And of course, innovate a whole bunch of things along the way, like inventing tensor cores, advancing NVLink so that we could create essentially virtually giant GPUs, and connecting them all together with amazing networks from a company called Mellanox, InfiniBand, so that we could create these giant systems. And so DGX-1 was our first version, but it wasn't the last. We built supercomputers all along the way. In 2021, we had Selene, 4,500 GPUs or so. And then in 2023, we built one of the largest AI supercomputers in the world. It's just come online, EOS. And as we're building these things, we're trying to help the world build these things. And in order to help the world build these things, we got to build them first. We build the chips, the systems, the networking, all of the software necessary to do this. You should see these systems. Imagine writing a piece of software that runs across the entire system, distributing the computation across thousands of GPUs, but inside are thousands of smaller GPUs. Millions of GPUs to distribute work across all of that and to balance the workload so that you can get the most energy efficiency, the best computation time, keep your costs down. And so those fundamental innovations is what got us here. And here we are. Be able to generate it as well. And so therefore, the generative AI revolution is here. Well, what else can we generate? What else can we learn? Well, one of the things that we would love to learn is we would love to learn climate. We would love to learn extreme weather. We would love to learn how we can predict future weather at regional scales at sufficiently high resolution such that we can keep people out of harm's way.
And so they rolled this out at the meeting. NVIDIA is simulating a copy of Earth with this stuff. By the way, one of their new chips has 208 billion transistors on it. One chip. And then they put these in these massive arrays. So just wait till they refurbish all these big data farms out here in New Albany and else all over the country and world. We're on the cusp of you've seen nothing yet. And the question is going to be how are we as people of God who are rooted in reality going to deal with reality that's so deceptive? How do we stay rooted and avoid that? Well, one thing it will be, I think will happen is people of God will hit their knees and say, Lord, come quickly, please. And maybe the Lord will do that. We know in Hosea, he comes back when the people, the remnant of Israel, calls for him to return. So we should probably be praying for it too. and stay close to the Lord. NVIDIA claims that the new platform is both 1,000 times faster at generating predictive images than current models and 3,000 times more energy efficient thanks to, you guessed it, a generative AI model called CoreDiff. And so here's a graphic that they've done. And this would have been great when we had those tornadoes and funnel clouds coming through, and you can see some of the stuff. And so I just have to say is I don't think you've seen anything yet. And then, of course, one of the things that you saw in the video was AI-powered agents to replace nurses in hospital. The World Economic Forum released this week, Metaverse Identity, defining the self in a blended reality. What is a blended reality? Well, it means real and fake melded together so you really won't be able to tell the difference. This is highly problematic, I believe. This is prophetic. This is AI Tower of Babel type stuff. And understand, it was a year and 3 months ago that ChatGPT was rolled out, and everybody says that's baby stuff. And I talk to people in the industry, and they tell me, John, what you're seeing, it's way beyond what you're seeing. And so we have these people who've turned this into a religion, some of them, and you wonder, so, I mean, look at the images. This is from the World Economic Forum report just released this last week. Metaverse identity. And then look at some of the images that they use. The hand. And the head, inferring identity from data. Identification in the metaverse. Now, this would have been great when you were a kid, because my mother says, who do you think you are? Like, well, I'll tell you who I am, Mom. The metaverse is, I'm a new guy in the metaverse. So she would have said, you're grounded. And I would have said, which part of me? And she would have slugged me. Digital identities in the metaverse. Figuratively slugged me. Okay. And look here, dysmorphia and depersonalization, derealization. This is Accenture, a big consulting company, and the World Economic Forum talking about this. This is what they released to the public. I'm wondering what's going on in the background. So that's when I said speeding into the matrix. I think I already made the case that we actually are speeding into the matrix. And we're losing our foundations. I saw this graphic this week. I don't remember where. I thought this was a perfect picture of, and so look, I'm America-centric because I live in America. I vote in America. You know, and I had a good life in America. And I thought this was a perfect graphic of what's happening to us as our foundations are not recognized anymore. Isn't that a great graphic? Indicative of where we are. And it brings to mind biblical parables about the man who built his house on the sand and what happens. Well, it works for a while, but then it goes away. So we have this thing called the Constitution of the United States. It's under attack. I don't really have a lot of time to get into it. There's a big case in front of the Supreme Court right now. And in the Supreme Court case, a bunch of AGs, attorney generals from around the United States, are challenging the partnership between government and tech companies to regulate and restrict speech. The Constitution seems to speak against that. So here's just a couple short clips from the oral argument this week in this case. State of Missouri AG, and I can't remember who it's against. First, you'll hear Justice Alito, who's your friend, and he's asking some questions. And then we'll go to the newest justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the one who couldn't define a woman when she was in her hearings. She maybe could, but she couldn't because she would have lost all of her intersectionality points that got her hired in the first place. So here's Alito questioning the lawyer for the government or tech companies, and then Ketanji Brown Jackson asking the question of the Missouri Attorney General.
Between the White House and other federal officials and Facebook in particular, but also some of the other platforms. And I see that the White House and federal officials are repeatedly saying that Facebook and the federal government should be partners. We're on the same team. Officials are demanding answers. I want an answer. I want it right away. When they're unhappy, they curse them out. There are regular meetings. There is constant pestering of Facebook and some of the other platforms, and they want to have regular meetings. And they suggest, they suggest rules that should be applied, and why don't you tell us everything that you're going to do so we can help you and we can look it over. And I thought, wow, I cannot imagine federal officials taking that approach to the print media, our representatives over there. If you did that to them, what do you think the reaction would be? And so I thought, the only reason why this is taking place is because the federal government has got Section 230 and antitrust in its pocket, and it's to mix my metaphors, and it's got these big clubs available to it, and so it's treating.
And he's exactly right. So here's Justice Jackson.
So my biggest concern is that your view has the First Amendment hamstringing the government in significant ways in the most important time periods. What would you have the government do? I've heard you say a couple times that the government can post its own speech, but in my hypothetical, kids, this is not safe, don't do it, is not going to get it done. And so I guess some might say that the government actually has a duty to take steps to protect the citizens of this country. And you seem to be suggesting that that duty cannot manifest itself in the government encouraging or even pressuring platforms to take down harmful information. So can you help me? Because I'm really worried about that because you've got the First Amendment operating in an environment.
Okay, listen. She should not be on the court. She swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, not your made-up, ridiculous, perverted view of it, Justice Jackson. You're concerned that the First Amendment might hamstring the government? That's the whole purpose of the First Amendment, lady. As I define lady, you may have trouble, and you can see me after the hearing, Justice Jackson, if you need a definition of lady. I think, I don't know what to say. I am dumbfounded. I'm dumbstruck. I don't know what to say. This seems to be so easy. So look at what Ayaan Hirsi Ali said, defining deviancy down, flipping upside morality, Romans chapter 1 and 1 Corinthians, and they've lost the ability to reason. The concern is that at some point, God says, that's enough. And it's over for them. And I want God's justice and vengeance to play out. And every day I'm looking forward to it. I hate to say that because it makes me sound uncaring or unloving. But I mentioned the saints under the throne in the fifth seal, and they're asking the Lord, when are you going to avenge us? And it's sort of like, And so I had a discussion with a friend, a bunch of emails back and forth this week, like, well, what does that mean? Well, maybe they're in a special place. Well, there's no purgatory, so what are you talking about? And maybe those redeemed saints in that time, first of all, they're aware of what's going on, right? And maybe they have a better understanding than we ever will here as to why God's vengeance is right, justice, pure, holy, and perfect. That is a distinct. I don't think that's a possibility. I actually think that's the probability. So I think, we need to, God will take care of it, right? But I'm just looking at, so we had this attack. So this is a big deal in geopolitics. Don't have time to go into it. About 133 dead in a theater attack in Moscow, a terror attack, and everybody's blaming everybody else. And the United States actually, I think I have a graphic here. They set fire to the building. There was you can see the theater was collapsed. There were 4 or 5 of these, 133 people killed. Very well executed attack. They've captured the people. There was some indication that it might have taken some of the police people to really about an hour to respond to this. And when it happens to the U.S., everybody says, where were the police? Why did it take them so long? Well, you don't know what's going on. Now, it does appear that the U.S., there was this on the State Department website a few weeks ago, telling people in Moscow, the embassy is monitoring reports that extremists have imminent plans to target large gatherings in Moscow to include concerts, and U.S. citizens should be advised to avoid large gatherings over the next 48 hours. That was a couple weeks ago. And there's some reports that Putin kind of dismissed it. Now Putin's saying it was Ukraine was behind it, and he wants to bomb it, and he was bombing things. Remember, Moscow's had these attacks in the past. This is New York Times from October of 2002. Chechens seized Moscow theater, taking as many as 600 hostages. The police went in a day or two later, and I think they used some kind of gas, and about 200 people, including the terrorist, died. There was also the terrorist attack in Chechnya. And so I've often thought, so here's Vladimir Putin. I'll just play 1 minute of what he had to say in response to the attacks.
Dear citizens of Russia, I am writing to you in connection with the bloody, barbaric terrorist attack, the victims of which were dozens of peaceful, innocent people, our compatriots, including children, teenagers, and women. Doctors are now fighting for the lives of the victims, those who are in serious condition. For the lives of the victims, those who are in serious condition. I am sure they will do everything possible and even impossible to save the lives and health of all the wounded.
Well, he's launched attacks. Remember, I've talked about this for 25 years, those of you who've been around me for that long, and the class I used to teach at another church. It was a small group, so there are not a lot of you left anymore, but back in 2015, I said back there 25 years ago that if Russia was involved in this Gog-Magog invasion, it might be because Russia had a Muslim problem and they had to deal with it. So in 2015, I was kind of excited that finally Foreign Policy magazine caught up to it, and here was the article they published in Marvin Kalb in Foreign Policy in 2015, Putin's Muslim Nightmare. Because a large percentage of Moscow, some estimate as much as 25% of it, is Muslim. So Putin wants to preserve Mother Russia. That's his right as the leader of Russia. I don't think he's a good guy, by the way, but he's allowed to do that. But if he has to do something to keep the Muslims at bay, what's one thing that he could do that might satisfy a lot of the Muslims on the planet? Maybe take care of the Israel problem. And so I think this, and remember, you see Erdogan putting up this thing, the perfect, the best Ezekiel 38 invasion map of Israel, except that includes southern Islamic countries, which I don't think are involved. But anyway, they're on top of it. And by the way, Erdogan this week, he had this to say about Netanyahu. He gave a speech, and here's what he said. And we, those who collaborate with the terrorist organization headed by Netanyahu, we leave to God those who left our brothers. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, whoever helps the murder of a believer, even by saying half a word, will be deprived of the mercy of Allah on the day of judgment. We pray to our Lord that the hadith will appear before Allah as written, will be manifested for these people. In other words, let's leave Netanyahu to Allah. He needs to be taken care of. And this is a big deal. So Russia's attacking Ukraine. I've got friends in Ukraine, and I get text messages from them. They attacked a hydroelectric dam, a lot of power infrastructure across Russia that are not military targets. And so that the concern is what's Putin going to do? Who's he going to blame for this, and what's he going to do about it? And it's a legitimate concern. And anti-Semitism, this is the Globe and Mail, a dangerous slide into anti-Semitism. The cover article of The Economist this week, this kind of brings into play Zechariah 12 and 14. Israel alone. I'll gather all nations together against Jerusalem. And so here's The Economist magazine talking about, look, it says this, at a moment of military might, Israel looks deeply vulnerable. Now listen, this is written by an Israel-hating Israel person. There is still a narrow path out of the hellscape of Gaza, the author says. A temporary ceasefire and hostage release could cause a change of Israel's government. That's what they really want. That's what our government is pushing for. The rump of Hamas fires in South Gaza could be contained or fade away. And from the rubble, talks of a two-state solution could begin, underwritten by America and its Gulf allies. It is just as likely, however, that the ceasefire talks will fall. That could leave Israel locked in the bleakest trajectory of its 75-year existence, featuring endless occupation, hard-right politics, and isolation. Today, many Israelis are in denial about this, but a political reckoning will come eventually. It will determine not only the fate of Palestinians, but also whether Israel thrives in the next 75 years. So this is, you see the battle shaping up. And I would recommend you go listen to the interview. Shut off this and go listen to the interview I did with Avraham Levine from Alma the other day, and you will sort of understand how the difficult situation that Israel is in. So here's a little bit more from this article. If you are a friend of Israel, this is a deeply uncomfortable moment. It is, okay, I consider myself a friend of Israel. And I'm uncomfortable that people like you are out there writing for magazines like The Economist. That's what really makes me uncomfortable. In October, it launched a justified war of self-defense against Hamas. Well, at least that's good. Whose terrorists had committed atrocities that threaten the idea of Israel as a land where Jews are safe. Today, Israel has destroyed perhaps half of Hamas forces, but in important ways, its mission has failed. And I would say failed because of you. They call it a humanitarian catastrophe. This week at the UN, and Gaudi Taub, I think, who was a man of the left for a long time, and he says, this is somebody who writes for Haaretz, a left-wing newspaper, and they're very anti-Netanyahu. They don't have the Israeli government. They want to change the government. And they hate right-wing people in general and the right-wing people that are in the Israel government. And that's okay. You don't have to like them. But you need to understand that it is an existential threat. That's the point. And I don't think these people understand it. So I'm telling you, when I wake up and I see the cover of one of the leading geopolitical magazines in the world. In this day and age, with AI, with technology, with the geopolitics, with the morality of the world, the decline, redefining of deviancy, everything flipped upside down, good is bad, bad is good. And I see this is the cover, Israel alone. And the way the graphic is set up, it would be very difficult for me to say there's nothing about Bible prophecy. I'm sorry. If you're saying that, you're blind. So the U.S. put out a resolution this week calling for a ceasefire, two-state solution, condemning Hamas. Of course, it was vetoed by Russia and China. They're putting forth their own at the Security Council. The U.S. will probably veto it. But everybody's calling for this. And the question is, why is the U.S. doing this? It doesn't make any sense right now. If Israel is our friend, let them fight their own war and support them and stop this. And then this video popped up from England, London, the other day. And it wasn't Princess Kate talking about having cancer. And boy, the conspiracy theories on that are off the charts. It's not her, it's AI. The bugs flying around behind her, they're fake, they're AI. It's the world's lost its collective mind, in my opinion. Everybody's losing touch with reality. Maybe that's the plan. But why did this thing come up now? With an election coming up, and then I saw this video.
This Barack Obama walking up Downing Street. He went into number 10 about 15, 20 minutes ago. A few questions shouted out to the former US president, but no Rishi Sunak actually on the doorstep to greet him. But you see Barack Obama turn around, a quick wave, smile, and inside he goes.
Now, he was there to meet with the Prime Minister and David Cameron, the former Prime Minister, now Foreign Minister, and then we introduced this resolution at the UN. Listen, maybe I'm just paranoid, there's no connection, okay, right? Caroline Glick, who I have a lot of respect for, has a great article. She refers to an old movie called Neferazatu from like 1920, The Triumph of the Blood Libel. Because she pulls out from a Canadian newspaper, the Hamilton Spectator. I believe that's where it was from. No, this is from La Presse in Canada. You see, they take this vampire character and it morphs into Benjamin Netanyahu, whether you like Netanyahu or not, okay? This is blood libel. Jews eat the blood of Gentile children at Passover. They bake it into the matzah. And here's the Hamilton Spectator article. And again, you see both Putin and Netanyahu are sort of this vampire character now. In its original form, Caroline says, of course, the libel was specifically about blood. About 1,000 years ago, Christians in England began accusing Jews of performing ritual murders of Christian children to use their blood to bake Passover matzahs. This week, Samantha Powers, former U.S. ambassador to the UN during the Obama administration, and remember her performance back in 2016 when she led the charge to not veto an anti-Israel resolution after Trump had been elected in the UN Resolution 2334. And she gave a speech defending what the Obama administration was doing. And now we have Obama showing up this week in a UN resolution from the US government. I stand by my characterization, the name I've given to this administration, the Biden administration. It's more and more clear all the time. And she said, she accused Israel of causing a famine in Gaza. And then Joseph Borrell, the foreign minister of the EU, said this.
No longer on the brink of famine. We are in a state of famine, affecting thousands of people. Chancellor Scholz told Prime Minister Netanyahu, we cannot stand by and watch Palestinians starve. Okay.
I can't stand this guy. Caroline says this, but facts are for losers. And anyway, if no one dies of starvation in Gaza, then that means that the good-hearted people of the world foiled Israel's evil plans. Whatever happens, Israel's ascribed criminality retroactively justifies Hamas's invasion and slaughter of Israelis on October 7 and supports the now open U.S. position that Israel must lose the war. They're cooking the numbers. This is a report from Tablet Magazine a couple weeks ago showing that, strangely, in this conflict, it's just a straight up line. And nobody ever questions the numbers. And there's people that have done this. General Amir Avivi, he was in Israel this week, and he said, there's more blood libel. He was at the State Department. I know General Avivi. Hope to interview him in the very near future. It's hard to leave me speechless and stunned, he said. But this is exactly what happened at my meeting at the American State Department when the representative in charge of the Israel-Palestinian case accused Israel of systematically sexually assaulting Palestinian women, and all this on the basis of a claim plucked from the finger of the United Nations in an attempt to find something to balance the horrors of October 7th. So Caroline, and I think she referenced this tweet of General Avivi in her article. But her point was, now it's the Israeli IDF who's engaged in rape of the enemy, not the other way around. Everything has been flipped upside down. You read my social media feed on Twitter, you would think Israel killed all their own people. The Palestinian Hamas is a peace-loving organization that just wants to live in peace next to Israel. And the rapes and the mutilations was all done by the IDF against its own people. That's all over my feed every day. So somebody who criticized me for criticizing Mike Adams, I'm going to tell you right to your face. First of all, you're banned from our channel because I don't want that garbage on our channel. Mike Adams is a Jew-hating New Age guy, and you need to understand, you need to look at the facts about that guy. And all these other people are engaged in these anti-Israel, anti-Jew diatribes all over the place. One lady was terminated from her position this week, finally. I'll tell you about it. If you want to email me, I'll tell you who that is. Israelis and Jews around the world were stunned by the swiftness and the ferocity of the propaganda campaign Hamas's supporters in the West launched. Less than 24 hours after the news broke, Hamas supporters at Harvard University kicked off the hate campaign by getting 31 student groups to sign a statement blaming Israel for Hamas's atrocities. And by the way, Seth Frantzman, who I think I'm going to interview here pretty soon from the Jerusalem Post, he has said the U.S. knew about this attack coming in Moscow a few weeks ago. You're telling me that nobody and all these intelligence services knew that Hamas was going to do this, including Israel's? But what about the U.S.? What about Russia? What about all these others that have these big intelligence operations? Did anybody say anything? No. It's very weird. As details of October 7th crimes began to flow, Hamas's supporters in the West responded with violent denials of them all. No rape, no immolation of children, no torture, no nothing. It was all Israel's fault. They said that Israel killed and raped its own people, and now Jews are raping Palestinian women. How do we know? Because they're Jews. The depressing thing, of course, is that Hamas strategy is working. The latent Jew hatred in the West was widespread enough to support their crimes. The propagation of the blood libels by the United Nations, the European Union, and the State Department is a disturbing indicator of just how bad things really are. Israel must stop trying to prove a negative. Persuasion doesn't work with people moved by emotion, particularly hatred. And as for the haters, countering them means going on the offensive on the battlefields in Gaza. It means destroying Hamas completely so that everyone understands that attacking the Jews is a bad idea. And on the battlefields of the current world, the answer is to expose the haters with as much vigor and ferocity as they demonize the Jews. I agree with her 110%. Bravo. This is what needs to be done. This is a war, folks. We're in the middle of it. The lines are drawn. Look at this. This is from the Times of London. We'll give them the guest prophecy updater, but they get a D minus for what the black horse of famine riding into Gaza. You see how they're using the apocryphal end times visuals? Crazy. Dramatic details. This is from Israel Radar. Dramatic detail. This comes from Con News. Hamas attack plan included raids on Dimona and Tel Aviv, says journalist Ilan Kafir at Con News. Hamas placed large forces on standby to execute the second phase of the assault deep into Israel, and they go into a bunch of details. You can go to Israel Radar _com on Twitter, on X, and read more about that. It's a very well-written summary that they got from Con News. I'm out of time. I'm going to go a little bit longer. I had an executive conference here. So back in December, the Financial Times reported about Israel laying waste to Gaza, and now the numbers are coming out. So if you look at this article, you see the way they have the graphics, and they talk about the military briefing, the Israeli bombs raining on Gaza. Boy, it's terrible what Israel is doing. They're destroying Gaza. They had a graphic in the article about, look, there's Gaza, 68% destroyed. There's Hamburg, Germany after World War II, 75%. Dresden, 59%. And they included a picture of Dresden, and it was destroyed. But then here's Peter Lerner, who's been a spokesperson for the IDF. Damage to buildings and wars. Raqqa, Syria, 40%. Mosul, Iraq, 65%. Now the numbers are coming out. In Gaza, it's 35%. So what the Financial Times said a few months ago, not quite true. And by the way, if you go to comment on this Twitter post, you'll see this. Who can reply? Accounts that at FT mention can reply. In other words, we don't want to talk about it. But they're not taking down the fake stuff that they did, the false stuff, the false narrative that they created. And look at this stuff. And Peter Lerner's right. This is Aleppo in Syria. By the way, how many protests on Harvard, on Berkeley, all these places? By the way, it's bad enough at Berkeley now. If Jewish students' parents are hiring them private security guards for them to navigate around campus. I heard that. What? Yeah, that's actually happening. University of California at Berkeley, supposedly one of the most prestigious universities in the United States of America, where it appears the foundations are not crumbling. They've washed the sand that they're being built on, have been built on recently, has washed them away. Here's another picture of Aleppo. That's not Gaza, that's Aleppo. This is about a 6-minute video. This is destruction in Syria. This is a video from about 6-7 years ago, after Russia got involved, by the way. Here's a picture of Mosul. I played this. This is from 2017 on RT. 900,000 displaced. 8,000 civilians dead and wounded. And you can see the place has been pretty much destroyed. And that was our government that did that. So this is goodness. Okay, I'm going to have to do a midweek. I'm going to play a couple minutes of this. This is Douglas Murray. This is a great way, a great mind arguing with someone who doesn't have one. South African journalist interviewing Douglas Murray about Gaza. So they'll talk over each other. I know people don't like that, but listen to what he does. Go find the video. It's about 9 minutes long. Play it over a few times so you can understand how to respond to these people. Here we go.
I don't think that at all that what's happening in Gaza is genocide. I think it's an unbelievable smear against Israel. I've covered that war as I've covered many others.
Don't you think it's a self-inflicted smear against Israel?
No, I mean, I was in Ukraine last year. Are the Ukrainians committing genocide? I ask you.
What's that got to do with Israel?
I ask you, there are many wars going on.
Yeah.
Is Ukraine committing genocide?
No.
Right.
Is Russia committing genocide?
Russia is committing a war of hostile aggression, sure. Although it doesn't seem to be attempting to eradicate the Ukrainian population as a whole, which is, of course, what genocide is.
Which is what Israel seems to be doing with Palestine.
Which is not.
I know that you worked for Fox News, and I was called by Fox News some time back to talk about the genocide happening in South Africa, and I said, there is no genocide happening in South Africa. So I was surprised that Fox could then see what was happening in South Africa as genocide, and yet what's happening in Israel as...
I don't speak for Fox. But the allegation of genocide against Israel, why would Israel be committing genocide in Gaza?
Like, well, what would you describe it?
It's a war. It's which I've seen up close.
Okay.
So let me just explain that. If you start a war, which is what Hamas did on the 7th of October, if you start a war, there are repercussions. There are repercussions to Russia for starting a war against Ukraine. Russia's lost a lot of troops. There are repercussions for Hamas for starting a war against Israel.
So do you think there are repercussions for an illegal occupation?
What's the illegal occupation?
Of Israel against the Palestinians.
Where?
That is an illegal occupation.
Where?
It is a determined illegal occupation.
Gaza?
Of course, Gaza and the West Bank.
Have you been to Gaza?
Yes, I have.
Is it occupied by the Israelis?
It's completely sealed off, as you know. That's
by
why
who?
they call it by the Israelis.
And who?
By the Israelis, by the US, and whoever else supports
and who else?
The Israelis. Isn't that enough?
No, tell me who else is allegedly sealing the Gaza.
I'm saying that Israel has completely encircled Gaza. Nothing goes in, nothing goes
Gaza
out, as
has.
you know.
Well, as you know, if you've been, Gaza also has a border with Egypt. Why do you not mention Egypt? Egypt has a stronger fence to fence in the people of Gaza.
Okay, so you agree that Gaza has been fenced off?
No, it's fenced off, although you might note that there are more workers until the 7th allowed into Israel to work and indeed to have medical treatments and others that were considered necessary, which Hamas doesn't provide. There was plenty more people every day coming into work in Israel from Gaza until the 7th than were going the other way into Egypt. So if I go back to this question, why do you say there's an illegal occupation of Gaza? Why did you say that?
Because there is.
Why? Well, who is
Israel
occupying
is an
it?
occupying state.
No.
It is internationally recognized.
No. It's not. No.
I want to move on.
That's your view. Hang on.
Whoops. I'm sorry. That's where did that go?
Don't misinform your view. But we can agree to disagree, but don't misinform your viewers. And
Likewise.
you can go back. Well, I'm not misinforming your viewers. I'm informing them because you're not. The point that I'm trying to make, which
Israel
you keep
moved away
on,
from Gaza, and Gaza has been sealed off
the
ever
point
since.
you keep on trying to distract everyone from is that Israel took every Jew from Gaza in 2005, handed it over to the Palestinians, who then voted in Hamas, and to the great detriment of the Palestinian people, they have been ruled by Hamas for the last 18 years. If you want to look to the source of the conflict, look to that fact.
Okay, so how many illegal settlements are there in the West Bank that's also illegal under the United Nations, under international law? Settlements on the West Bank are illegal.
Which ones are illegal in your view?
The Middle East, and every time there would be a peace agreement, settlements would pop up, and that's why we are where we are today.
No, it's not.
So let's try and move on. No, let's try and move on.
It's not at all why we are where we are.
Hang on. We're not achieving anything here, so let's try and move on.
No.
Let's try and move on.
No, it's very, because you just did it again. You just threw in another false fact. We are not where we are today because of settlements in the West Bank that are disputed. That's not why Hamas broke out of Gaza on the 7th of October and massacred people in their homes.
As we know, Hamas got Israeli support
Okay, well, that gets a little bit... go watch it. I mean, Douglas Murray does a phenomenal job with this person. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Israel left Gaza in 2005. By the way, if it's sealed off, how did they build 600 miles of tunnels? Avraham Levine told me, he was in Gaza. And he says, you clear an area, you go back 20 minutes later, and 3 guys pop up out of the nowhere. So when you see a map that Israel controls all this of Gaza, no. They have some of the surface controlled, not underneath. And it's a difficult situation. By the way, remember Al-Shifa Hospital, the one that Israel was accused of throwing rockets in there and killing 500 people at the beginning of this? And it was really a Hamas rocket or Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that went astray and hit a parking lot and maybe injured a few people, not killed anyone. But New York Times, CNN, all the press, oh, look at what Israel's doing. It's awful. It's terrible. They killed 500 people at Al-Shifa. So Israel cleared Al-Shifa Hospital. People are now being let back into northern Gaza. What happened at Al-Shifa Hospital? Israel went back there today. They arrested hundreds of Hamas terrorists and killed 150 in the hospital. Have you heard, was that raised at the UN by anyone? So I want you to get this article by Yaakov Lapin at JNS, Hamas attack, weapon of mass distraction as Iran nuke program advances. It's one of the most important articles I've seen, jns.org. In my Avraham Levine interview, it's linked there. And he talks a lot about what's going on the Hamas, on the Lebanon border. This is a very hot area. This is going to be a problem. In fact, here's the border, and this is the Litani River, that blue line. And they said, well, we'll just move everybody north of the Litani River. Everything will be okay. But that whole area is tunnels under houses, every other house, every third house. Abraham told me in Gaza, every house they went into had a map of just Palestine, no Israel. Every single house. Doesn't mean they're all Hamas supporters, but they're certainly on board with that ideology about getting rid of that thing called Israel. Okay. So, and I'll do a midweek update sometime this week probably. And I have as I said, I have some interviews. So pay attention, folks. This is a very significant time in which we live. And our goal here is to inform you of some of these things, to kind of put it into a biblical Bible prophecy perspective. Prepare your hearts, prepare your minds. And believe me, while I called this speeding into the matrix, it could also be barely scratching the surface while speeding into the matrix, because there's a lot going on. It's really hard to keep up. So pay attention. Subscribe, like, and share in our channels, and we would appreciate it. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for instructing us about these things so that we can make sense of on the surface, what appears to be just the crazy world around us, to be informed, to be people of God led by the Holy Spirit, willing to share the gospel with those around us in a difficult time. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.